Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart. Something a little bit different in this video. I've got a big sword and I'm going to paint it.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems and offer custom items to suit your club or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description.
I think it's been well over a year, probably more like 2 years, since Warhammer Community first teased the Warhammer Armory made by Burgschneider. A couple of articles on Warhammer Community. I think the guys were there at the recent Warhammer World Open Day as well, showing off some of their wares. And I signed up ages ago for email updates, and there was just nothing much on their website, even though I looked at all of their other wares. They make lots of medieval things, have a license with Dungeons and Dragons as well, but I was excited to see what they came up with. If you click on the Warhammer Armory section on the Burgschneider website, suddenly it turns into a Warhammer website. The Nuln army there is front and centre, and I love Nuln, so this really appeals to me. And at the moment you can buy some Nuln themed clothing and some swords. There's some greyed out stuff there that's coming soon, and I'm not going to be buying any clothing. I've got no intentions to go and play any LARP, even though it might be fun. Maybe I'm getting too old for it now. But they do these swords. They do 3 different designs, and you can buy them painted and unpainted. And I decided to opt for this model. I decided to opt for an unpainted stalwart blade. I thought it would be really fun to just get my hands on a LARP sword, because I've never held one, and paint it. And this big box arrived. I did pre-order a little while ago, about a month or so ago. It's arrived before the end of the pre-order period, which is pretty cool. It's not cheap. It was about £110, and I didn't really know what to expect. But my first sort of view of it, well, it was really nicely packaged. It's clearly packaged for retail there, so I do wonder whether we'll see them available in Warhammer World and maybe some of the other big flagship stores in other parts of the world as well. And I guess I'm not sure what to expect. I didn't think it was going to come in this kind of packaging. I thought it'd be a plain box. So in some ways this is really cool. Otherwise, maybe makes it feel a little bit toy-like. I'm pretty sure my wife saw it in this state. She'd be like, okay, how much was that? What's, what, is this a toy? Of course it's a toy. It's a big boy's toy, or a big girl's toy. It's an adult toy, and it's good fun. But I was still excited, and the packaging was pretty good. One thing that really impressed me actually is the way it was just attached here. It wasn't just a normal cable tie. These are these little Velcro strips that you often see electrical cables tied together. I know a lot of my microphones, my Rode microphones and things will have those, so you can attach them to the stands and things. So a really nice touch, something that's quality, that you can almost put your sword back in the box afterwards and reattach them rather than having to cut them out. And if you're a parent, you know what it's like trying to remove kids' toys from the packaging these days. But I didn't buy it for the packaging. That's obviously not the most important thing. And I really didn't know what to expect. I've never held a LARP sword. I've seen them in pictures. I appreciated it was going to be foam. And I know a lot of crafters make their own costuming. I don't know how many people make their own to physically play with. I don't even know much about LARP to know how physical you get, but I'm guessing it's physical enough that you would hit another blade with it, and their foam to protect other people for it. But I don't really know how full on it gets. And here's your Vermintide first person combat shot. There's a slightly stronger rubber in the handle and the pommel and the hilt. I believe that runs through. I don't know how it's made. It may be really interesting to find out, but runs through, and then you've got this softer silver coloured foam there over the top. I'm going to start with a standard airbrush matte black here, and I'll say right now, for all the people that are going to start writing in the comments, this isn't the right kind of paint to use. I'm not ever intending on taking this out to LARP with or swing in anger. I say never, because you never know what might happen in the future, but that isn't my intention. I've bought this as a cool thing to own, to put on my wall, and it's Warhammer branded, so it's fun to make content out of as well. I love Warhammer. I love that it's got Warhammer iconography on it, and I have other replica and deactivated weapons already. I'm interested in that kind of stuff. Funnily enough, I'm into Warhammer, so I'm painting this using the techniques that I know how to do. I've got a little bit of advice from Alex and Carolina. I had them on the show a few months back now, and they talked about their own creations. I had a brief chat with Alex, and he just said, just paint it like a Warhammer sword. If you want to finish it afterwards and add lots of lacquer and stuff to protect it, you can as well. So I'm using Necro Gold now from scale 75, just because it's got quite a desaturated brassy effect, and I want this to look like a worn gold. Maybe it's gold plated or it's like a brassish handle. I don't want it to look too ornate, but when you go in with a bright gold it can look like that. But I will weather this, and that's part of the intention. I've also not masked off here deliberately. I could mask off here and protect the silver, but I'm pretty good with the airbrush. I'm not worried about the tiniest bit of overspray, because I'm planning on adding some weathering in those areas anyway, and the time it would take to mask off, it would just be wasted. This is Dwarven Gold. It's got much more warmth in it, and I wanted to add some variation in tones on the metals throughout this whole process, really. So I'm just adding a little bit in certain patches, almost where the depressed areas where the light isn't catching quite as much would be, just so you end up with what will be 3 golds in the end, just to add that nice idea of light catching in different places. You're going to get light catching anyway, because it's relatively shiny and it's a large thing, so you don't have to over accentuate it in quite the same way as you would with a miniature. But I'm learning here, and I'm using many of the same processes. And this is Elven Gold from the same Metal and Alchemy range from scale 75. And if you've watched me paint lots of miniatures and you're a regular to the channel, you'll have seen me use these golds loads. They are among my favourites. And this is much brighter again, and a natural highlight more for the Necro Gold. And I'm just using this actually as the light reflection, so very much towards the top here, just catching the edges and not worrying about doing the underneath quite as much. Adding some more to the centre where you've got that Imperial skull design, just lightening that slightly. Then as I get to the pommel on the top of that skull, but very much focusing on the top sort of 25% of that pommel where the light is really shining, and you end up with this nice gradient between the lighter gold there, the Necro Gold in the middle, and that warmer orangey gold underneath. And gold wears with your hands on it, and as I said already, it might actually not be gold, it might be a polished brass or a painted brass or something like that, so I want it to look a bit more worn. This is Doom Metal from Two Thin Coats range. It's almost black, it's like a metallic black. And I'm just using this here to edge back in where that tiny bit of overspray was. And this is what I was talking about, no need to mask, because I intended on adding these shadows anyway. You've got this nice silver base on the blade, foam to work with. So I thought, rather than starting like I would with a miniature from a dark colour and lightening up, I'll use that as the base, and I'm going to tint it and tone it and weather it and see how I can go from there. As I said, this is the first time I've ever done anything like this, so it's new to me, so I'll be learning from my mistakes and as I go along. Now back to that scale 75 Metal and Alchemy range, and this is black metal, but it's a little bit lighter than that previous really black metal. This has got blue tones to it, so I'm just adding this to the next layer on top of that and blending that out into that brighter silver which is there, and it seems to work quite nicely. And again, I just want to build up a little bit of variation in tone on that what would be steel. I don't want it to just look like a kid's toy where it's one flat colour. I want it to look like light shining and catching it from all different places. I'm also going to dirty it up a little bit later as well. I want it to look like a blade that's not been abused in terms of never been looked after, but that it has seen some conflict and campaign. So here you can see I'm just using that same colour just to run down the middle of each half section of the blade there, just to darken it a little. There is actually a slight depression there anyway, and I'm not talking about the one right in the centre, talking about on those flatter areas. This is a Kellyan green contrast. We're moving on to the contrast paints, and I'm again adding more colours in, and this adds a little bit of a blue-green tint to it, so it's slightly fantastical, but again, working at this scale is what I've decided to do, and it just adds a little bit more tone into that steel. And I'm worried a little bit here about it being a little bit hydrophobic, especially with a very liquid paint here. So I've got the pressure quite low and I'm really building this up in tiny layers, partly because I don't want it to suddenly shoot out and leave everything really horrible and ugly looking, but also because I want this to be super subtle. I'm just tinting here. Normally I'd do this as glazes with the hairy brush, but because I'm using the airbrush, I'm essentially adding the faintest of filters just in sections. So you can see I'm just going over those depressions that I painted with the black metal a moment ago, and then also down that center ingress, that little rivet all down the middle. Now on to the next stage, and this is cuirass leather from Two Thin Coats, and I'm actually using a standard brush at this point. I could have airbrushed this on, but that would have involved masking, and this is a large enough area that I've just gone straight for a regular brush, and it's quicker just to paint this directly on. So again, no need for masking. Masking takes time, and if you can find a way of painting without it, regardless of what scale it is, I've definitely moved more towards less masking. When I found that masking just ended up taking more time, or as much time as it saved in the first instance. And while that's drying, I can go back to the blade again, and this is plate armor from Two Thin Coats, and I'm using a dry brush. I've got my dry palette out and I'm just catching the edges here, much like you would with miniature painting, just trying to highlight and enhance those rougher edges that you can see there, and just go down the center as well, just enhancing that sort of center rivet or line down there. It's probably got an official name on a blade, but I don't know. And then with the same colour, I'm just dry brushing very lightly over this detail in the middle, and then along the edges of the hilt as well. So you're really catching where wear and tear handling of the weapon would wear away that gold plating or that brass or whatever we've decided it is in the end, and it adds a little bit more life to it. And I continue this right up the top on the pommel, catches that detail on the skull and that little bit of leaf work there, but then also those edges right at the top where the hand might rest at times, wearing away that gold plating. Now that that cuirass leather has dried, we can go on to the next stage, and this is boar hide also from Two Thin Coats, and I'm just dry brushing here. I thought I could go one of two ways. Do a mid-tone and then make it darker in the middle, as if the oils and the sweat from your hands would have taken away and stained some of the leather. That would probably be realistic in many ways. Or the other way, maybe you're wearing gloves most of the time when you're fighting, and I quite like the idea that the leather is worn and therefore a little bit lighter, and I thought that that would make more sense to the eye, especially with something like this, make it a little bit cartoonesque. After all, it is a foam sword, and I think it's working quite well. Super easy to dry brush. You've got enough texture there in the design on the handle there that it's picking up, leaving some of that darker brown in the recesses. And continuing with the dry brushing, we're moving on to some fur cloak also from the Two Thin Coats range. And again, if you're a miniature painter, that's a little triad designed to work together, and it does really well. And I'm just focusing even more in the center there, so you can see that a little bit of a transition from the pommel end and the hilt end, a little bit darker and then lighter in the middle where the hand would sort of wear away most. Now for some Cygor brown contrast paint, and I'm just picking out the detail here and just painting these in. I've been very careful throughout this whole paint job not to kind of revert to some of the things I would use on miniatures. I don't want to put anything with enamel in, anything that's not water based, because I don't know how it's going to react to the foam or the rubber, because I've only really painted it or based it with a standard acrylic primer, because I haven't done any of the LARPy kind of stuff or the costuming kind of stuff. I wanted to be careful. So I won't be defaulting to any oil washes or anything like that here. Also, occasionally this is going to be picked up and handled, isn't it? People pick up swords, and if I use things like that, they're more likely to get on your hands, wear away, where acrylic paints are pretty safe with that. And if I just varnish them afterwards, I think we're safe. But it is more about being safe and painting detail in like this, rather than relying on too much on effect. So I do use one at the end. But essentially, I'm just painting in the little lines here where the depressions of the leather wrapping round would be, and it really just makes it pop and defines it a lot more, makes it look a lot better in my opinion. Continuing with the Citadel contrast paints, this is Agarash Dunes, which is a fairly light yellowish tone, a little bit desaturated. And what I'm doing here is just really try to add variation to the golds now. I don't want to rely on natural light. I want it to be painted detail as much as I possibly can. So bringing some of those miniature painting processes and thought processes maybe more into the painting of this. So adding into the recesses here like I mentioned earlier, I don't want to add any oil washes, which would be the go-to on a miniature for something like this. So I'm just sort of painting in some contrast into the recesses, into the eyes on the skull, into those little depressions to add a little bit of shadow, and I'll continue to do that until I feel that it's right. So essentially what I'm doing here is just kind of building up layers of shadow here really, and it really enhances the brighter areas where I've dry brushed on that plate armour, and just doing it stage by stage so I don't go too far and mess anything up. Again, more contrast, and this is where it gets wacky. This is Mantis Warriors Green, and this is where I like to think about metallics and the way the light reflects and wear and tear on metallics and verdigris and colours and things that build up. And greens always work really, really nicely with golds, but I am being super subtle, just like I was on the blade with a Kellyan green. I'm just being super subtle with this on just the golds here at the moment. It just adds a little touch, a little tone here, starts to make the gold plating look a little bit old and worn and not the newest blade out there, and maybe not the richest person. And then after that, feeling confident that it looked good, I decided to add it a little bit on the blade as well, just to add that sort of extra colour in there, to add that extra depth. And it was risky because I was fairly happy with the colour of the blade, but also I felt it worked, and I was glad that I did it in the end. In some ways, just going over where some of the blue already was, rather than directly onto the silver areas, it just toned that a little bit more. I think made the blade look a little bit more realistic, look a little bit more tonal variance, which you see if you hold a blade up to sunlight, or if you see people painting in non-metallic metals and the different shadows and different gradients you see, you're almost replicating that in reverse on this sort of plain silver rubber. Having looked at it, I still wasn't happy with the gold, so I've grabbed some Gore Grunter fur, which is quite orange. Decided to add that into the recesses even more. The Agarash Dunes was good, and it toned a bit, but there's certain areas I really wanted to reinforce. And because the detail's quite shallow on that Imperial design, I thought by adding something darker into the recesses would really lift the top areas, and that's what I'm essentially trying to do here. And obviously it works exactly the same on the other areas, so I went back to the skull that's on the pommel and did the same thing. Now on to the one effect that I could risk. This is Dirty Down Rust, and it's because it's water based rather than a really dangerous enamel. I thought I would risk it. And I'm not painting rust per se on the blade. I don't want it to look that old. It's not something that's been found in a tomb or dug up. But I want to add a little speckle here and there to make the blade look like it's less than perfect. It is cleaned in between battles, but maybe it's not been used for a week or so, but it has a little bit damp and little patches of rust form. And those of you that own metal things will know that even when they're looked after, a little bit of weathering, you can get the odd little rust spot, the odd little mark and things to it as well. I'm just trying to add more interest for the eye. It doesn't necessarily have to be rest. I'm just adding colour in many ways. So it was a risk, but again, it's one of those things that I tried out and I was quite happy with in the end. And once you start, you keep going with these things. So I just added a few very, very subtle little dots here and there. And you really have to look for them sometimes. Very, very subtle little dots. And then blend it out and wet blend it with a little bit of water to thin it out. Just so it looks like this slight discoloration here or there, rather than necessarily rust or anything that's too bad going on. And I even added it in patches to the gold. Essentially, it's just an orangish colour that's very, very easy to blend and manipulate, and you can build it up by layers quite well, and you get a rusty effect then. But when you're subtle with it, again, it just looks like a little bit of discoloration here or there, and I quite like the way it came out. Now, this is just airbrush AK gloss varnish to protect it, which is what I'm doing now so that I can handle it a little bit and show it off in the video. I may go back and buy some stronger lacquer gloss for this and really protect it so I can clean it when it gets dusty and things, but this seems to be enough. Again, in the comments, those of you who make LARP weapons, do costuming, I'm very much open to understanding what I could do to protect it more, but I'm not necessarily taking it to play with having painted it like this, but maybe it would work like this. You let me know in the comments. But essentially, I've painted it like this more for the effect and the fun of doing it. A little bit of matte varnish as well, just to put back over the leather. I want to take away the shine from that while I've left the gloss varnish over all the rest of it, the whole blade, the pommel, the hilt, etc. But in those comments, please do let me know. I've done a bit of research. I know you can buy these sort of latex rubber coatings and all those kind of things. I don't want to make it look too shiny and like a toy, because it is just going to sit on the wall. If there's things I can do with it that make it even stronger, let me know, because I'd love to find out. But this is it, just after I'd finished it and the gloss was dry enough to pick up and handle, and it was everything I hoped it would be, really. I had lots of fun doing it. I tend to say this a lot at this stage of my videos, but I really did have lots of fun painting this, and partly it's because I wouldn't paint things that I wouldn't enjoy painting and wouldn't have fun with. But hopefully you can see there that that colour variation in the blade, the blues and the greens, have come out really well. And this extra shadow put in there, an extra variation from that plain silver, and I managed to leave that silver there just by doing very, very thin glaze like layers with the airbrush, and it seems to be pretty strong. It's overnight now, it's dried really well, and I've held it in my hands, no paint is flaking off. I'm sure if I went to hit people with it, it wouldn't be as good, but it's been good. It's been good fun doing it, and kind of makes me want to do more, but they aren't cheap. And if Burgschneider are watching this and they'd like to send me more to paint, then I will happily make more videos with it, especially if people like to watch it. But I don't know if can afford the whole collection. Though new things like Garmaraz coming out in the future would be very, very tempting. So we'll have to see how much that is. But again, if Burgschneider, you'd like to send me Garmaraz to paint, I will happily do it. But let me know in the comments what you think of this. I thought it was a fun departure from miniature painting. It's absolutely Warhammer related, because this is a Warhammer licensed sword. But I really had lots of fun. My boys are very interested in it, as you can imagine. So I have to stop them from swinging it around each other and flaking the paint off. And even the wife was quite impressed. And she knows how much it was, which is surprising as well. Rather dangerous for me. But loads of fun doing it. And I hope to do more in the future. Well, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed that slight change of programming. I mean, it's still Warhammer at the end of the day, but it was life-sized, or nearly life-sized, and I had loads of fun doing that. And I'd love to hear what you think about it. Did you like the slight change in topic to the usual 28mm stroke 32mm painted Warhammer on a square base? And would you like to see something more like that? They're not cheap, so I'm not going to be buying loads of LARP swords to paint on the video, but I would love to do more in the future as they release more. I know they're talking about bringing out Garmaraz, but I'm slightly scared about how much that might cost me just to make a video like this, but you never know. If I can afford it, it would be lovely to have on the wall. And if enough of you enjoyed this and would like to see how I'd paint that, then maybe I will look into that. But yeah, it would cost me a lot of money. But if you'd like me to make more videos like that, the best way you can help me afford it is to support me on Patreon. And there's a link in the video description below, and there are multiple tiers on there, lots of things to suit different financial needs and requirements, depending on whether you want tuition or just want to support me. You of course don't have to do that. If you want to show me support just by liking this video, comment below, subscribing to the channel, that's great as well. Please do check out the other links in that description as well, including the channel sponsor, Counterattack Bases. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.